This is one I probably shouldn't tell you about, but when a United States congressman uses his dead mother's identity to steal from disabled veterans for 7 years, that's a story that needs to be told. Congressman Marcus Thompson had been representing Rhode Island's 2nd District in Washington for 12 years when he showed up in my courtroom on a Wednesday morning in November. He wasn't supposed to be there. A parking violation involving a sitting member of Congress was supposed to be handled quietly behind closed doors with a phone call to the right people, maybe a quiet payment through his office. But sometimes the system works the way it's supposed to. Sometimes a fraudulent disability parking placard becomes the thread that unravels a $340,000 fraud scheme that destroys a political career and exposes a man who thought his congressional title put him above the very laws he voted to create. Marcus was there because he'd been cited for illegally using a disability parking placard outside the federal courthouse. $250 fine. Nothing that should have brought a sitting United States congressman to municipal court personally. He could have sent his chief of staff, had his legal counsel handle it through official channels, paid the fine online like any other citizen. Instead, he came himself, and he brought 3 lawyers with him, 3 attorneys in expensive suits to argue about a parking placard. That should have told everyone in the courtroom something was very wrong. Parking Enforcement Officer Angela Martinez had written the citation. She'd been on the job for 4 years. Careful observer, meticulous with documentation, followed every protocol. When she saw the black Mercedes with congressional license plates parked in a disability space outside the federal courthouse with a blue placard hanging from the rearview mirror, she did what she was trained to do. She ran the placard number through the State Disability Services database. That's when things started to look wrong. The placard was registered to Martha Thompson at an address in Providence. The placard had been issued 8 years ago. Angela was still checking the details when Marcus came out of the courthouse building, saw her standing by his car with her citation device, and started talking. That was his first mistake. "Officer, I think there's been a misunderstanding," Marcus said, using his smooth congressional voice, the one he used at town halls and press conferences. "That placard belongs to my mother. She was in the car with me earlier this morning for a doctor's appointment. I must have forgotten to remove it before parking here." Angela kept checking her computer screen, looking at the placard details, the registration information, the issue date. "Sir," she said professionally, "this placard is registered to a Martha Thompson at 847 Cottage Street in Providence. The placard was issued 8 years ago on March 12th. Marcus smiled, the kind of smile that had won him 6 congressional elections. "Yes, officer, that's correct. That's my mother. She has severe arthritis and mobility limitations. I sometimes drive her to medical appointments in Providence and here in the city. She wasn't with me today, but I forgot the placard was still in the vehicle." That's when Marcus made his second mistake. He started talking about his position, his influence, his record. "Officer, I don't know if you're aware, but I serve on the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee. I've been a strong advocate for parking enforcement funding in Rhode Island. I personally helped secure federal grants that purchased the new digital citation system your department uses. The handheld device you're using right now, I helped get funding for those. I've also worked to increase federal support for disability access programs, accessibility requirements in federal buildings, ADA compliance funding." Marcus listed his accomplishments like he was giving a campaign speech. "The equipment upgrades for your department, the training programs for parking enforcement officers, the salary increases that came through last year's transportation bill. I think my record of supporting parking enforcement and disability rights should count for something here." Angela Martinez finished documenting the violation details on her device. She'd heard plenty of people try to talk their way out of tickets, but something about this felt different. "Congressman," she said, "the placard regulations are very clear under state and federal law. The disabled person must be present in the vehicle when parked in a designated disability space. The placard cannot be used for the convenience of family members when the disabled person is not present. The fine for improper use is $250. You can pay online or contest the citation in court. Marcus looked at the citation device in Angela's hand, then at her face, then at his Mercedes sitting in the disability space. Then he made his biggest mistake. Officer, let's be realistic here for a moment. I sit on the committee that oversees federal transportation funding for Rhode Island. Millions of dollars in grants, infrastructure projects, equipment purchases. I have direct relationships with the mayor, the police chief, the transportation director, the disability services commissioner. I'm sure we can find a mutually beneficial way to resolve this situation without all the paperwork and potential embarrassment to both of us. Think about what's reasonable here. This is a minor oversight about a placard, not a serious violation. Angela Martinez's body camera recorded every word. Her handheld citation device time-stamped every sentence, GPS tagged the exact location, documented the congressional license plate, photographed the placard hanging in the Mercedes. By the time Marcus walked back toward the federal courthouse, thinking he'd handled the situation diplomatically, thinking his congressional title and committee position had resolved another minor inconvenience, Angela was already uploading the incident report with video, audio, and documentation to her supervisor's system with a priority flag. Parking Enforcement Supervisor Robert Chen had been managing the citywide unit for 8 years. He'd seen thousands of parking violations, hundreds of people trying to use borrowed or expired disability placards, dozens of cases where family members tried to use a relative's placard for their own convenience. But something about Officer Martinez's report made him stop and read it twice. The way the congressman had specifically mentioned his committee position, the federal funding he controlled, his relationships with city officials, the phrase mutually beneficial resolution, it felt less like explaining a mistake and more like making a threat. But what bothered Chen even more was what he found when he ran the placard details through the cross-reference system. Martha Thompson, the woman whose name was on that disability placard, whose social security number was linked to that registration, whose address was listed as 847 Cottage Street in Providence, had died 7 years ago. The state vital records database showed a death certificate filed on May 8, 7 years prior. The placard Marcus was using had been issued 8 years ago, 2 months before Martha Thompson's death. But according to the Disability Services Renewal Database, that placard had been renewed every single year for 7 years after Martha Thompson died. Someone had been submitting annual renewal applications, complete with physician certifications of continued disability for a dead woman, and that someone had access to Martha Thompson's personal information, her social security number, her old address, her medical history. Chen called Detective Patricia Reeves from the Municipal Fraud Investigation Unit. Patricia had been investigating identity theft, benefits fraud, and disability scams for 10 years. When she heard that a sitting United States congressman had been caught using a disability placard registered to a woman who had been dead for 7 years, and that he'd threatened the officer who cited him while mentioning his control over federal funding, she knew this was bigger than a parking violation. What Detective Reeves found in the first week of looking into Marcus Thompson's use of his mother's identity was concerning enough to call both the State Attorney General's Public Integrity Unit and the FBI's Fraud Division. Marcus had been renewing his deceased mother's disability placard annually for 7 years using her personal information, but the placard was just the beginning. Martha Thompson's social security number was still active in multiple government databases. Her identity was being used for tax deductions, medical expense reimbursements, dependent care claims on congressional health insurance. For 7 years after her death, Martha Thompson had supposedly been attending doctor appointments, receiving physical therapy, getting prescription medications, and incurring substantial medical expenses that her son was claiming on his federal tax returns and his congressional health benefits. The investigation that followed took 5 months and involved prosecutors from the state attorney general's office, agents from the FBI's fraud division, and investigators from the IRS Criminal Investigation Division. What started as Congressman Marcus Thompson trying to intimidate a parking enforcement officer over a $250 citation became a federal investigation into disability fraud, identity theft of a deceased person, tax fraud, false statements to federal agencies, and fraudulent claims for government benefits that reach back 7 years and involved over $340,000 in stolen benefits, fraudulent deductions, and abuse of programs meant to help genuinely disabled Americans. FBI Special Agent Karen Foster told me later that most cases involving disability benefit fraud start with anonymous tips from concerned family members or red flags in Medicare audits. This one started because a parking enforcement officer did her job, ran a placard number through the system like she was supposed to, and refused to be intimidated when a powerful politician tried to use his congressional position to make a citation disappear. And it started because a congressman couldn't resist threatening an officer while standing next to his car illegally parked in a space reserved for disabled people, with his dead mother's parking placard hanging from his mirror. "Good morning, Congressman Thompson," I said when he appeared at the defendant's table with his 3-attorney legal team. "Your Honor," he replied, smooth as polished marble, that congressional charm working overtime. Marcus was the kind of politician who could work a room blindfolded. Telegenic, eloquent, knew every constituent by name, showed up at every ribbon-cutting ceremony and town hall meeting. He had his picture on billboards across the district with the slogan, "Thompson delivers results." Member of the Transportation Committee, voted for 3 major disability rights bills, gave speeches about accessibility and inclusion. "Congressman, you're here regarding a citation issued on November 3rd for illegal use of a disability parking placard. The fine is $250. Are you contesting the violation?" One of his lawyers stood up immediately, the tallest one, probably billing $900 an hour. "Your Honor, Congressman Thompson acknowledges there was confusion about the placard belonging to his late mother. However, we believe the circumstances warrant dismissal based on—" I held up my hand. "Counselor," I asked the congressman. Marcus looked at his legal team, then back at me, adjusting his American flag lapel pin. "Your Honor, the placard belonged to my late mother. I had forgotten it was still in my vehicle from a previous occasion. It was an honest oversight, the kind of mistake anyone could make after losing a parent." "Congressman, according to Officer Martinez's report, you told her the placard belonged to your mother and that you use it to drive her to medical appointments. Is that accurate?" Marcus shifted slightly, loosened his tie just a fraction. "Your Honor, I misspoke in the moment. My mother passed away 7 years ago. I should have removed her placard from my vehicle long ago. I simply forgot it was there." That's when I opened the file the State Attorney General and FBI had sent over. It was thick, over 280 pages of disability placard renewal records, tax returns, medical insurance claims, Social Security Administration documents, and bank statements. Congressman Thompson, during their investigation into this incident, federal and state investigators discovered some interesting information about your late mother's disability placard. Specifically, they found evidence that you've been fraudulently using your deceased mother's identity to claim disability parking privileges, tax deductions, and medical expense reimbursements for 7 years after her death. The courtroom went dead quiet. Marcus's 3 lawyers started whispering urgently to each other, shuffling through briefcases like they might find some document that could make $340,000 in fraud disappear. "Your Honor," Marcus said, his congressional confidence cracking, "I don't know what you're referring to. This is clearly a misunderstanding about a parking placard I forgot to remove from my vehicle." Congressman Thompson, state records show that Martha Thompson's disability placard was first issued 8 years ago on March 12th, 2 months before she passed away. That placard was legitimate. Your mother qualified due to severe mobility limitations from advanced OST1 of Marcus's expensive lawyers stood up. Your Honor, these are serious allegations that should be addressed by the appropriate state licensing boards and federal agencies, not in municipal court over a parking citation. Counselor, sit down. Congressman Thompson brought this into my courtroom when he threatened a parking enforcement officer while illegally parked in a space reserved for people with genuine disabilities. We're going to address it here. I continued reading from the FBI file. Congressman, the IRS also found something interesting about your tax returns. For 7 years after your mother's death, you claimed her as a dependent on your federal tax returns. Each year, you claimed approximately $12,000 in medical expense deductions for her care. Marcus was quiet now, staring at his hands. Your Honor, those were legitimate expenses I had incurred before her passing that I was still paying off. Congressman, the IRS found receipts and reimbursement claims for medical services provided to Martha Thompson dated years after her death. A receipt for home health care services dated November of last year, an invoice for physical therapy sessions from 8 months ago, prescription medication reimbursements from 6 months ago. You received $7,800 in medical expense reimbursements from your Congressional Health Insurance Plan last year alone for services supposedly provided to your deceased mother. Over 7 years, you claimed $84,000 in medical expense deductions for a dead woman. You received $48,000 in insurance reimbursements for medical services that were never provided. The Social Security Administration also discovered irregularities. Martha Thompson's Social Security number was used to apply for supplemental disability benefits 3 years after her death. The application claimed she had developed additional mobility limitations requiring assistive devices and in-home care. That application was approved for monthly benefits of $1,340. For 4 years, those benefits were deposited into a bank account at Coastal Credit Union. Marcus shook his head. Your Honor, I have no knowledge of any such account. Congressman, the account was opened using Martha Thompson's Social Security number and your signature as her designated representative. The account was linked to your personal checking account. Bank records show regular transfers from Martha Thompson's disability benefit account to your personal account. Over 4 years, $64,320 in disability benefits meant for genuinely disabled Americans was deposited into accounts you controlled. The FBI interviewed Dr. Robert Harrison, whose signature appeared on all 7 disability placard renewal forms. Dr. Harrison told investigators he never examined Martha Thompson after her death. In fact, Dr. Harrison retired from practice 5 years ago. Investigators compared the signatures on the renewal forms with Dr. Harrison's actual signature. The handwriting analysis determined they didn't match, but they did match handwriting samples taken from your congressional office correspondence. You forged a doctor's signature 7 times to fraudulently renew a dead woman's disability placard. What makes this particularly troubling is how calculated it was. The FBI discovered a password-protected spreadsheet on your personal laptop labeled Mom Expenses. It contained renewal dates for the disability placard, amounts claimed for medical deductions each tax year, monthly disability benefit amounts and deposit dates, and a running total of savings from parking in disability spaces estimated at $8,200 in avoided parking fees and tickets over 7 years. I sentence you to pay the $250 parking fine, plus a $10,000 fine for witness intimidation and abuse of office, plus court costs. But I told him the real judgment would come from federal prosecutors, the voters of Rhode Island's 2nd District, and every legitimately disabled person who couldn't find parking because people like him were stealing their spaces. As the bailiff stepped forward, Marcus turned back to me one last time. Judge, you don't understand the pressures of congressional service. I work 80-hour weeks serving my constituents. The placard was a small convenience in an impossibly busy schedule. I made a mistake, but my years of public service should count for something. Congressman Thompson, I said, leaning forward, I understand public service. What you did wasn't service, it was theft. You stole from disabled Americans. You stole from taxpayers. You stole from the programs you were elected to protect, and you used your dead mother's identity to do it. That's not a mistake. That's systematic fraud over 7 years. Take him away. The federal case took 11 months. Marcus was indicted on 34 counts, including disability fraud, identity theft, tax fraud, wire fraud, making false statements to federal agencies, and forgery. The trial lasted 4 weeks. His lawyers argued it was negligent record-keeping after a family tragedy. The jury deliberated 6 hours, guilty on all 34 counts. He was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison plus $340,000 in restitution. The IRS imposed an additional $125,000 fine for tax fraud. The House of Representatives voted 398 to 12 to expel him, the first congressional expulsion in 20 years. Marcus served 6.5 years of his sentence. When he got out, he couldn't find work in politics or law. He works now as a consultant for a small lobbying firm that handles municipal contracts. His wife separated during the trial and divorced him after his conviction. His 2 adult children changed their last names. That $250 parking ticket he tried to intimidate his way out of, he never paid it. After his congressional expulsion, the state wrote it off as uncollectible. $250 seemed insignificant compared to the $340,000 in fraud proceeds he had to repay. A special election was held 3 months after his expulsion. The winning candidate was Sarah Chen, a disability rights advocate who uses a wheelchair due to a spinal injury from a car accident 15 years ago. Her first bill as the new representative was called the Martha Thompson Memorial Act, increasing penalties for disability placard fraud and requiring annual cross-checking of placard holders with Social Security Administration death records. The investigation revealed Marcus's parking patterns over 7 years. He used disability spaces at the federal courthouse, the Capitol building when permitted, restaurants, shopping centers, and his own district office. Over 7 years, investigators estimated he parked illegally in disability spaces over 3,000 times. James Morrison, a 67-year-old veteran who lost both legs in Iraq, wrote me after the conviction. He regularly couldn't find disability parking at the federal courthouse for his VA benefit hearings. Multiple times he saw Marcus's Mercedes in disability spaces with the blue placard visible. I thought he was helping a disabled family member, James wrote. Instead, he was stealing from people like me. I gave my legs serving this country. Congressman Thompson couldn't give up a convenient parking space. Sometimes I think about Marcus Thompson standing in that parking lot, telling Officer Martinez his position on the Transportation Committee should count for something. But being on the committee that protects disability rights doesn't give you the right to violate them. Real public service means protecting the vulnerable, not exploiting programs meant to help them. Officer Angela Martinez did exactly what she was trained to do. She ran a placard number through the system because something looked wrong. She had no way of knowing that routine check would expose 7 years of fraud or that it would protect thousands of legitimately disabled Americans from future abuse. But that's how justice really works, not through dramatic investigations or complex stings, but through ordinary public servants doing their jobs honestly, even when powerful people try to intimidate them. Marcus's fraud wasn't just about money or parking convenience, it was about dignity. Every time he parked in a disability space, he stole opportunity from someone who legitimately needed it. Every time he used his dead mother's identity to claim benefits, he betrayed her memory and stole from genuinely disabled Americans. But in the end, the system worked. A parking enforcement officer did her job. A supervisor recognized something wrong. Investigators followed the documentation. Federal prosecutors proved that congressional power doesn't override disability rights. Voters demanded better representation, and Rhode Island's 2nd District got a representative who actually understands disability challenges and fights for those who need accessible parking. Marcus Thompson learned that no title, no position, no years of service can excuse stealing from disabled Americans, and that stealing dignity from people who already face daily challenges has a price he'll spend the rest of his life paying. I'm Frank Caprio. Remember, sometimes the best judgment is not in the book, it's in your heart. Thanks for listening, and God bless.